Let us speak. So, one of the great mysteries coming from Disney and Marvel this year is that one of their most well received shows, in fact, probably one of their only universally well received shows by critics, was X-Men 97. But that right before the show started airing, just like a week and a half before, they fired the showrunner of it, the person who claimed to be responsible for all of the creative aspects of the show. I mean, we'll get to that in a minute. But they fired the person who was the head of the show very, very suddenly and under very mysterious circumstances, because usually when there is conflict behind the scenes, like they didn't like what he was doing with the show or something like that, they say it was for creative differences, or they give some kind of indication over what it was for. Like when Marvel parted ways with Scott Derrickson, there seemed to be some bad blood between him and Marvel, but even then, the reason given was over creative differences. But that wasn't even given with Beau DeMayo, the showrunner in question. There was no indication of anything whatsoever that had happened. It was just very sudden, right out of the blue, and there was absolutely no official indication about what the reasons for. And having X-Men 97 be an overall well-received show after that made it all the more baffling. But there were some rumors at the time coming out. For example, Insider Big Screen Leaks said of people praising his work on the show, and that people saying that Beau DeMayo should come back and even work on the X-Men movies. He said, I'm going to circle back to this when it all comes out. So there were some indications about what it might be. After that, after a silence, Beau DeMayo returned to social media at about episode 5 of X-Men 97, and this is going to be very relevant later on. He was more vocal than anyone else about the show, more vocal than I have ever seen a person who worked on a show be about their show. He would constantly interact with fans, constantly talk about his intentions, to constantly talk about all of the wonderful themes and things he would put in the show, to the point of outright spoiling things in the show. Like, he would give the numbers of the comics that he was basing it off of, and as soon as people would guess something, like, for example, Wolverine get his skeleton ripped off, he would say, exactly. So he was out and out spoiling things from the show on social media, and I thought, Disney Marvel can't be happy about that. Why is he allowed to get away with this? And so I stopped following him for reasons that we will get into in a minute, but I am aware that once the show stopped airing, he stopped being vocal about it so much. He just kept posting his thirst trap photos. Now, I stopped following him on social media after the show aired, and I was very glad to unfollow him. Why? Because ever since I started to follow him just to get information from the show, it was a hard thing to do because he kept posting thirst trap photos. All of these photos of him shirtless or upper half nude photos of himself leaning into the camera, constantly coming as, and in my opinion, coming off as very narcissistic and self-obsessed. He stayed silent apart from continuously and constantly posting thirst trap photos until X-Men 97 episode 5 was nominated at the Emmys, which he gladly patted himself on the back for and was very, very excited about that. But then his attitude started to change a bit, because what happened was Beau DeMayo posts on Twitter that he, shock of all shocks, was not invited to the Emmys by the company that fired him, and that he was trying to change that. But what was a bit more telling were the tweets that he did. Now, once again, up to this point, at least from what we had seen from Beau DeMayo, he was very, very respectful and even talked about being very, very professional with one's work when he talked about X-Men 97 on social media. But now he was coming off as very upset about this, and he started to say things like, I'm the sole creative point of this show. This is a show that I created, even though it is a continuation of a show someone else created, which is an adaptation of something else. And so just a day later, Beau DeMayo came out on Twitter and started to infer that the reason that Disney fired him was because of homophobia, because he is a gay guy, and he posted a photo, which is in true fashion of what he constantly posts on on social media of him dressed up in nothing but Cyclops' underwear and visors, and he claimed that Disney was stripping his credit from season 2 over this photo and that they had emailed him about it. Of course, Beau DeMayo did not show the email in question, but he said, "Stay tuned for more." Very dramatic. Just an hour later, and I guarantee that Marvel had this article prepped because they saw him babbling, Marvel fired back at Beau DeMayo and said that he was not fired over the Instagram post. He was not fired for any of that. He was fired for sexual misconduct and egregious findings that they found through an investigation behind the scenes. Even still, Disney Marvel would not reveal the specifics of that. But first of all, I believe that they will if Beau DeMayo speaks up anymore. But we got some information from insiders behind the scenes over what actually happened. And here's the thing about taking tips from insiders. Some people legitimately do not have any credibility on what they know on the inside going on in Hollywood and just say things for clicks. Some people have a track record where they get some things right and other things wrong. Other people have a very good track record of what they know behind the scenes. I personally consider someone's track record and also how many insiders behind the scenes are saying something. And that's why I think that there's a lot of credibility to this stuff in the first place, because multiple insiders are talking about this stuff. Big Screen Leaks came out again and talked to and criticized Beau DeMayo for flying his mouth over this stuff constantly and having the word of egregious findings come out. Grace Randolph came off, and I know a lot of people don't like her, but she actually does have a good track record when it comes to Disney Marvel, and said that people who work with Beau DeMayo had been reaching out to her and that they had had some very shocking stories behind the scenes. But the closest we got to specifics was from a newsletter from Jeff the Insider, who I have signed, on what he claims he heard happen behind the scenes. And he claims that Beau DeMayo would constantly send either nude or nearly nude pictures to his young male subordinates in heroic poses for quote-unquote inspiration for X-Men 97, and that he was asked to stop but did not, and that he also was accused of sexually groping one of the staffers and young assistants. And I 100% believe these things to be true. Why? Because this is exactly how Beau DeMayo behaved on his social media. The reason why I stopped following him, even though I wanted to follow just to be up on the news of anything happening, is because Beau DeMayo would constantly post pictures of himself, self-sexualized pictures of himself on social media. Like, this is not just the photos that you would post about, look at me, I work out at the gym. No, this is very much sexualized, very much pushing yourself on other people. There is not any time that you could follow Beau DeMayo that he would not have his bare-chested pecs out right in front of your face as his social media profile, constantly posting these things on social media, and also posting himself in sexualized ways with the X-Men characters, like that time when he posted himself in nothing but a diaper and a Magneto helmet, or even the photo in question that Beau DeMayo claimed he lost his credit over, that is him in nothing but Cyclops underwear. Like, this guy constantly is sexualizing himself to everyone. Once again, it comes off, it's one of the many ways that he comes off as so narcissistic, but also he's constantly using the X-Men and this property that he was hired to work on as a way to sexualize himself. And I believe that a lot of this guy's personality and who he is in real life comes off in his work with the X-Men. After the revelation, which should have been obvious, that he wasn't going to the Emmys, he released an X-Men Writer's Bible that he apparently did in 2014 or 2015, and he said that this was not an X-Men 97 Writer's Bible, but that he released it for some reason, and I think that he did it to make it look like, oh, he's just such this great person who's worked on these characters and understands them so well. But it kind of backfired in order to release this, because this Writer's Bible continued to have very odd things to say about the characters. And there was a lot about it that kind of referenced the way things were in X-Men 97, because this guy's thoughts on the characters seem to be consistent. Like, this guy absolutely fetishizes Magneto, and it's just so odd. And once again, surprise, he does it in the show, which we'll talk about in a minute. But once again, in this Writer's Bible, it's about Charles Xavier is dead and Magneto is the leader, and even though he makes mistakes, he's ultimately in the right. He is ultimately the sympathetic guy in the right, which is how Beau DeMayo seems to see Magneto. And it's something that needs to be pointed out is if you followed Beau DeMayo in any capacity, you know that this guy has a thing for Magneto, and he self-inserts himself as the character a lot. And we can see that in this writer's Bible, and we just get some very odd descriptions of other characters. Gambit is so badly characterized in this thing, and the description that Beau DeMayo gives him, I cannot repeat on this channel, but it's like with Beau DeMayo, everything needs to be hypersexualized, and this comes off in everything he does, from social media to how he depicts characters to how he describes characters, and that is a good sign of somebody who has a problem in those areas. Like, before I saw any of this, when they terminated him so suddenly, I thought it has to be sexual misconduct, because they were propping this guy on their shoulders from being a black, gay showrunner for the X-Men for so long, and then they terminated him so suddenly with no word. When something like that happens, you have to assume it's like sexual misconduct or something like that. But when you see all of this and how he behaves on the regular and describes characters on the regular, then you know, yeah, it's probably something in that area. It was so obvious that even if you watch the show of X-Men 97, as a lot of people have noted, and that I noted, there's a very sexual feel to it, and I would say unnecessarily. I noted this while I was watching the show, that it just seemed like it was very gratuitous in terms of various comments and imagery that was used, and even some of the plot points, I think, are a reflection of Beau DeMayo and his sensibilities. Rogue's backstory with Magneto in X-Men 97 is literally, my evil mom brought me to live with her much, much older boss, to live in isolation, for him to be my teacher, and he went about seducing me, drawing me in very sexually suggestive poses, and inviting me to dinner with him when he wore a bathrobe. And then, as soon as the guy found out that it was possible, conveniently possible, to touch me, they entered a sexual relationship. That is outright creepy, and it's even more creepy when you add to the fact Rogue was 100% supposed to be a teenager at this time in her history. Rogue in the comics, her time with the Brotherhood, her time with Mystique is always supposed to be when she's a teenager. And she's supposed to capture Carol Danvers' powers when she's 17 and join the X-Men when she's 18. That is the case in all of these comics. And the frame of reference that they give you of when she met Magneto in the show is after she ran away from her father. And she says in the original cartoons multiple times she is 13 when that happens.
It was back after I ran away from my daddy.
You know, I remember when I was 13, liked to kill my daddy when he found out I was a mutant.
And maybe you have leeway because it isn't explicitly stated when she joins the X-Men in the show like it is in the comics, but she still behaves like a teenager right before that happened.
Why did I have to hold on, Mama? It felt bad.
And to make an even more damning statement about this, Beau DeMayo is basing this history of Rogue and Magneto off of not the mainstream comics, but off of the alternate universe AOA, in which Magneto pulled some Woody Allen crap and married his foster daughter, who was Rogue. But that happened years and years later after he adopted her from Mystique when she was about 14 or 15. At least it happened later. So, yeah, she is supposed to be a teenager at this time, and Beau DeMayo should know that. But the only indication that she was not a teenager at this time is from Beau DeMayo's Twitter, that when people asked, did Magneto groom Rogue, he responded, she was in her early 20s at the time. First, and that makes me upset, because first of all, that is a blatant retcon, and Beau DeMayo knows better than that. Second of all, nothing to indicate in the show that that is the case. Third of all, even if that was the case, that doesn't make it any better. What bothers me about Beau DeMayo's response is that all it tells me is that he doesn't see anything wrong with this relationship, and he also doesn't believe that adults can be groomed, and that there can't be situations like, say, a much older person uses their maturity and experience, or say their position of power, like as a boss or a teacher, to influence somebody much younger than them, kind of like how Beau DeMayo tried to do with the young male staffers in the X-Men 97 team. Were they in their early 20s, Beau? But have you ever heard the term art reflects the artist? Beau DeMayo creates a storyline about a very young person being seduced by someone much older in a position of power. Beau DeMayo tries to come on sexually to his much younger subordinates working on X-Men 97. 1997. I haven't been this shocked since Kevin Spacey, who made a movie about a middle-aged man obsessed with a teenage girl, was revealed to be a guy who went after underage boys. Art reflects the artist, and we also get that with Beau DeMayo's constant Magneto fetish, creating a bondage scene with him in the show, completely unnecessary, of Magneto tied up with his underwear. Magneto is the most sexualized character in the show because he's the one that Beau DeMayo personally has a thing for, and Beau DeMayo comes out online and says that actually, in his original script, Magneto was supposed to be straight up naked in that scene. That alone just creeped me out. Like, a lot of people just try, oh, so funny, like, Beau DeMayo's just such a horny guy. He's a creepy guy for doing these things and for inserting these kinds of things in a show that, while it was not specifically targeted at kids, is still labeled a family show. And you just see this all in his X-Men Writer's Bible and what he put in X-Men 97. And reminding, this is still under the restrictions of what Disney would allow, and it is on Disney for allowing this stuff in the show still, but also for hiring such a guy. Because when you have this guy that is just hypersexualizing everything on his social media, on his show, and just fetishizing everything, and then he was fired mysteriously, and then you get that these were the allegations, it's pretty obvious. And by the way, Disney alleges that the reason why they stripped him of his credit was not because of the Instagram post, it was because they had an agreement with him to not tweet about the show, which he broke, which makes total sense to me, because I was like, why is this guy allowed to outright spoil the show on social media and Disney does nothing about it? Just from the perspective of this, like, Disney and Marvel, their story adds up, and the story that the insiders are giving adds up. It's Beau DeMayo's word against all of this, and I want to address the people who are continuing to defend him, because it seems that just because this guy created a show that they like, that means that he must be innocent, that there must be, that there's some truth to his words. The fact that a lot of people hate Disney right now means that they must be in the wrong somehow. Well, Disney is in the wrong for hiring this guy in the first place, and I think that might be why they didn't want this stuff to come out. They didn't want another scandal right before they were going to promote a show. According to Jeff the Insider's reports, a lot of people are very upset with Brad Winderbaum, who is the executive at Marvel Animation who hired Beau DeMayo, because he did not do his due diligence and see that this guy already had a history of this kind of stuff when he was working at Netflix for The Witcher. So yeah, Disney is to blame in terms of hiring this guy in the first place, but I just do not see how these allegations against him are untrue with all that we see from him. And the only reason why anybody thinks that this guy is some sort of white knight defending the source material is that that's what he claims about himself. That's what he tried to claim about The Witcher, and he had his coworkers come out then and talk bad about him, and none of the people who have worked with him in terms of working with him day to day has said anything good about him. We've only gotten leaks of them saying bad stuff about him. And after reading the Writer's Bible for the X-Men and the other stuff he said behind the scenes, I was like, I'm right now convinced that the only reason anything good came out of X-Men 97 is because of the other people that worked on it, because this guy is a straight up creep, and it does not seem like he gets the characters at all. But this makes me mad for 3 reasons. One, I took so much crap from people for calling out the creepy stuff in X-Men 97, for saying that we shouldn't rush to defend Beau DeMayo because looks like there's some bad stuff here. Got so much crap from people for that. Also, I hate hearing yet another situation where a creeper was put in a position of power, and considering all the people that he hurt, people who had to work with this guy day to day and deal with this. But also, I'm upset because this was a show that was supposed to be a continuation of a show that means a lot to me, of a show for kids, and you hired this creepy guy to try to push his own creepy thoughts, his own fetishes on these other characters and try to spread it to other people. Why did you have to hire this guy? Like, I've heard of people who get blacklisted in Hollywood over merely rumors of this kind of stuff. How was this guy, who had worked at multiple companies and had this stuff happen, how was he still getting work? That makes no sense to me. So yeah, it is on Disney for hiring this guy in the first place, but I'm at least glad that this information information is coming out now, and that people are starting to wake up that this guy is not the X-Men savior that he was trying to profess himself to be on social media, and that they're admitting like the stuff with Magneto, the Magneto fetish stuff, that they're looking back on that and saying, yeah, that was actually pretty creepy, which it should be. This was a reflection of who the writer and the guy working on this was in real life. But I'm glad that it's gone. I don't know how you save X-Men season 2 now after this. Like, apparently they are rewriting it. We've heard multiple reports of that. We've heard it from Variety. We also heard it from these insiders that there are being rewrites. And I mean, maybe season 2 of the show will not have all of those creepy fetish elements that the first season did. I don't know if they'll be able to fix the pacing or some of the characters like they did before. But honestly, it's kind of tainted for me because of what happened for this show. I mean, I'm sure I'll probably watch it when it comes out, but once again, it just makes me upset that they let this happen in the first place and that they spoiled the only X-Men show, the only X-Men thing we really had gotten in like 12 years over having to hire this creeper to work on the show. And this is not the first or even the second time that they've hired creepers to work on the X-Men. So what I'm saying is a good old-fashioned do better, Disney Marvel. Do not hire these guys to work on these shows. That is all I got for you guys today. At this point, if we get even more information about this guy, it'll just be filling in the details and just how horrible all this stuff really is. But I am completely convinced of his guilt in this situation. But that is all I got for you guys today. I hope I was able to inform people of this situation. If you want to support me on Patreon, as these 10 wonderful people have done, check out the link in the description. And I will see you guys next time.